Hi, I'm Erik Mansur from Nanigans, and this is The Playbook. On this week's episode of The Playbook, we talk about avoiding analysis paralysis. Now, in any business intelligence software suite, you're going to have metrics and attributes that you need to pay attention to as a campaign manager managing a campaign on a daily basis. The problem is there are a lot of those metrics and attributes that don't really mean much of anything on a daily basis where you need to pay attention to them. So, by avoiding analysis paralysis, we can talk about some of the things you really should be looking at on a day-by-day basis to make sure your campaign is successful. Now, the first thing I look at is the granddaddy of them all. It is CTR, click-through rate. And you can usually tell how well creative is performing within an audience by keeping an eye on rising and falling click-through rate. Because if click-through rate basically stays the same or is increasing, then that audience is still clicking on your ad, still reacting positively to your images and body text that exists with that creative. But of course, if your CTR is going down, then it might be time for a creative refresh. Get that creative out of the marketplace and replace it with something that's new. Now, once a person actually clicks on your ad, that's the click-through rate, what do they do once they get there? Do they actually install your app? Do they get to your site and deliver their email address for a lead to drive or an email registration? That is conversion rate, CVR. And if your conversion rate is increasing, good news, audience is still performing well. If your conversion rate is decreasing, bad news. Then it might be time for an audience refresh, or at the very least, a creative refresh to change the messaging to that audience. Another thing I pay attention to is how you, or how I would measure, lifetime value with regards to this campaign. Yield, return on ad spend, return on investment. Those three things are going to be a way to measure how well a campaign is performing as you get further and further and further down the funnel. One thing that I always try and pay attention to, and others may not, is impressions. Because impressions, when you compare it to your targeted reach, can help you decide how penetrated you are into that audience. Think about this. If I have a targeted reach of 1 million people and my impressions are now 1.5 million, I know some of those people have seen my ad at least more than once and sometimes more than twice. So if you keep an eye on the number of impressions you've driven, you can sort of decide how well saturated that audience might be with your advertising message. And again, it helps you flip up the kind of creative that you're pushing to them, or actually, do a complete audience refresh and get new audiences out there into your campaign. But really what you're trying to do, particularly in a CPA campaign, you're trying to drive mobile app installs, trying to drive leads, trying to basically drive user acquisition, is the KPI you're looking for, the number of events and the cost to acquire that event. This puts the key in the words key performance indicator. The KPIs you're trying to pay attention to are always something you want to keep in your daily metric view. And if you're optimizing towards revenue, if you're a mobile gaming company looking for purchasing users, or if you're an e-commerce company and trying to drive as much revenue as you possibly can, looking at the number of purchases and the amount of revenue that you can drive is super important. And really, that's the KPI you're aiming for. You're trying to find the best users possible within the marketplace, so number of purchases and the revenue itself is ultimately important. At the end of the day, if you hit all of these numbers, CTR, CVR, yield, impressions, events, purchases, you want to be able to measure spend. That might be the most important metric to pay attention to, because if you're actually doing well on every other metric, the more you can spend, the more you can scale, is probably the best indicator of how well your campaign is doing. The key to good campaign management is separating the wheat from the chaff, separating the metrics that you really want to pay attention to from the metrics that, are a little fringe, you don't need to pay attention to. It's helping you keep an eye on information that is a key to your campaign, and that's going to make sure your efficiency as a campaign manager is at the highest possible level. That's the buzzer. Time's up. If you want a question answered on a future episode of The Playbook, send us an email. It's theplaybook@nanigans.com. I'm Erik Mansur. Thanks for watching.